What kind of message do you think it sends to survivors like you that Ghislaine Maxwell has been transferred to a minimum security prison?
The message that it sends that Ghislaine Maxwell has been transported from a high security federal prison in the state of Florida to a much lesser degree, I think, minimum security prison in Texas, which I hear is, I don't recall the name that they've called it, but it's almost like the country club of prisons, if that even can go in the same statement together and make sense. But clearly it's a much cushier place to be. The message that sends is, well, it's already diminishing the bit of justice that we saw in her being prosecuted, charged, and found guilty on the 5 charges that she was found guilty on. It's already diminishing that. Why are we hearing again this message that power, influence, and money, as corrupt as all that is, can get you a better situation or a lesser sentence, or into a better place that you prefer to be? It's kind of wiping away some of that accountability, I think.
How does it feel for you personally? You were there at her trial.
Well, for me personally, to know that she's already has had some relief from the consequences that she was facing for her actions, it feels absolutely horrible. I feel like I personally am being robbed of the sense of, you don't ever fully get, I don't think anyhow, a full sense of gratification or satisfaction after someone has hurt you so badly and taken so much from you. However, there were consequences that she was facing. There were consequences that she deserved. So to have those consequences lessened and lightened, it feels like a violation. It's like directly a violation against me is how it feels.
Do you feel like you're kind of suffering all over again through this decision?
Yes. So it is a re-traumatization of the events that I've already been traumatized by. Not only going through what I've gone through, being such a young woman at the time, and then living with the result, I would call it the aftermath of trauma, for a very long time, and then to have the ongoing media coverage, the ongoing, I would call it a political weaponization back and forth both sides, to the constant seeing memes, comments, things. It's always in your face on a daily basis, and it has been for years. And then to have a woman that has harmed you so badly moved from a place that she was desperate to get away from, to a place that she likely feels much, much better about being in. It, like I said, it certainly diminishes some of the justice. It makes me angry. Yeah.
Do you think Donald Trump is about to pardon Ghislaine? And if he does, what would that mean to you?
So I certainly, I don't sit here and think that that is what he's going to do, because I don't know that I could even rationalize that thought process currently in my mind, because it would be so devastating if he were to pardon her. And I do understand that he has made this clear statement that he has the ability to, and something that's within his authority is how I took that. And something that's within someone's authority doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to. So I personally, like I said, I don't think I can even bring myself to think that that's a possibility just yet, because it would be so tremendously devastating to myself, to all the other women that have suffered from these people, and really any person that has faced any type of sexual trauma anywhere across the world, because it would send this horrific, terrible message that, again, ongoing corruption, power, deals can be struck and made. It's just not something I can't allow myself to consider that's a possibility right now.
Do you think Donald Trump is in the so-called Epstein files? Do you think he was involved in abuse himself?
You know, do I think he was involved in abuse himself? I would have to say no. And the reason that I don't think that is a few different thoughts. And I understand that I can't sit here and be sure because my experience doesn't give me that information firsthand. However, there have been multiple survivors that have shared with me that he specifically was not involved in harming anyone. I also wouldn't understand if he were, why was that information not brought forward during his campaign or his first presidency or the first presidential campaign. I don't know that it would really add up why it would only come to light now.
You think that other powerful men were involved, though?
Yes, I do think that other powerful people were involved. You have so many women that have come forward and spoken about their experiences with these men. And so you cannot have sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, all these things cannot take place if there's no one purchasing, if there aren't sex buyers involved. So, and I do know that often, this whole time really, it's been referenced as a client list, Epstein's client list. And what I would really like to reframe and to put it into the appropriate wording is to call it what it actually is, which is Epstein's sex buyer list. Because I do think that continuing to call it client list really sends an idea of consent, that there was some level of consent involved. And it almost even endorses this idea that the client was somehow maybe a victim of Epstein as well, as if they unwittingly did something. Whereas, again, these people that are complicit in the crimes of Epstein and Maxwell, the people that benefited from Epstein and Maxwell and their sex trafficking enterprise, they are sex buyers. So I do wholeheartedly believe that, based off of information that has been shared from other survivors, it's absolutely certain that there are other powerful men that have purchased sex and have been a part of their sex trafficking enterprise.
And who've never faced any kind of justice.
And have never faced any kind of justice yet.
Do you think that day will ever come?
I believe that it must, and I certainly hope and pray that it does. You cannot, I don't believe our society, really any society in this world, can continue down the line decade after decade with this constant world where money and name, prestige, power, position will constantly get you out of accountability if you're harming other people. That's what we've done this whole time. And, it's so far beyond time for that to completely change and shift. And what, the ongoing message that we send to, I think, youth and children is, you grow up, and if you have a certain level of power, money, prestige, then you can harm people and get away with it, use people and get away with it, or have this superiority complex over others, when really, and I know we talk a lot about power, I think power is like self-control. So I would also argue that all these people that are hurting others, that's not true power. They have no self-control, you know.
What would you say to the defenders and allies of Ghislaine Maxwell who'd say that she is a victim as well of Jeffrey Epstein?
It's nonsense, absolutely nonsense. What I can share very specifically from my specific experience, my lived experience with Ghislaine Maxwell, there was nothing victimized that she was not sitting in any kind of victim seat. I was brought into her home, and the entire process of meeting with me and connecting with me, and everything was so meticulous and so intentional. And the end goal, or the end game, was for her then to create and build this trust within me, so that I was willing to go meet with her partner, Jeffrey, who is not someone I had heard about the entire time from any of the women that I had already met with before I was even in Ghislaine's home. That was all very intentional, very well crafted.
You were being groomed.
The grooming process is, I mean, it was like the playbook of the grooming process. Well, I feel as if I could write a playbook from that experience that day. And not even that day, but all the way from when I first was approached with this opportunity when I was working at the school that I was also a full-time student at. So there were 2 women that I met with prior to Ghislaine. So every single one of them knew what they were doing. Not one single one of them was a victim. They were all part of the plan. They were all part of the process. Each woman essentially handed me off like I was a human baton from one person to the next. That there's nothing unintentional, or there's nothing that they were victimized in those situations. So I just wholeheartedly, hands down, reject the idea entirely that Ghislaine Maxwell was at any point a victim.
What can you tell me about your actual interaction with Epstein himself?
Well, what I can say is that it started by me walking to his home. As I said, I hadn't learned this entire process from sitting behind the desk at school to the last bit of time that I was there at Ghislaine Maxwell's home in New York City. I never knew at any point in between all of that there was a man named Jeffrey, her partner, as she referred to him as, that I would even be meeting with. However, because she had done such a great job in building that trust with me, I disregarded any kind of red flag or internal alarm that popped up in my self, and I walked myself to the home of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, at first, he was very polite and charismatic, and there was good conversation between he and the chef and I. And then that all changed. That changed when he was finished eating his dinner, said goodbye to the chef. I was invited into his office. It was different from the office I had been waiting in when I first arrived. And then it was to a different office, his personal office, a much larger, bigger office space. And, things got really bad for me in there. There was the tragic part. One of the tragic parts of this story was at Epstein's home. So my interaction with him started out, me feeling relaxed, comfortable. I was nervous going there because I thought this is a second part of the interview that I hadn't previously known that there was going to be. But since I'm here, the first part of the interview must have gone so well, because the whole time I thought I was there for an interview. And so I thought now I'm going to the second part of the interview to really seal the deal on this job. I'm going to get hired. So it was a mix of feeling nervous, feeling excited. You know, I was clearly in a very powerful person's home. It was beautiful. It was just as beautiful as Ghislaine had said it was. And so there were all kinds of different feelings and emotions going through me. But overall, I can't say that I felt unsafe at all when I got there. I felt safe and secure because the woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, had, you know, that's the trust that I felt. I didn't, it's like it, you know, it, one of the main purpose that grooming serves is to erase doubt, to build trust. And if there's ever anything that you do feel and anything does pop up, you're willing to push it to the side because you rely on the trust that you thought you built.
When did you realize when you were there that things had suddenly changed?
During conversation with Jeffrey, and when he started putting parts of his body on mine inappropriately. So everything changed then and there. And then it only got worse before I was able to get out of his home.
Were you able to sort of raise the alarm, or there was no one else?
There was no one else around. The only person, someone who let me in, and then the chef. But I didn't see anyone past the chef besides Jeffrey.
And were you able to sort of tell anyone afterwards, or were you sort of consumed with the feelings of sort of shame, or you didn't want to tell anyone, or what happened afterwards?
Well, no. So shame, you spot on. So the shame that I felt directly after was nearly paralyzing to me. I was flown back to Los Angeles the next day, and I didn't share with anyone what had happened to me. And not only did I not share, I also, you know, for 17 years, I didn't realize who they were. I didn't realize that there were so many women that were being hurt. So once I flew back, you know, I was so ashamed, and I was so broken by this. You know, my family knew I was flying out there for the interview, or what I thought was an interview. My friends knew. The school knew because I was a full-time student and a full-time employee. So I was there. I was at the school. I practically lived there. Everybody knew I was going. I was so excited and really hyped at this opportunity. So not only was I so ashamed of feeling like, how could I have not known? How could I have not known? But that's the thing with shame, is you are so bombarded with this it's like directed inward, when it absolutely should be directed outward, and not only directed outward, but it should be residing with the person, the perpetrator, the predator. It should reside within them. But that's another really key point to grooming. It's almost like a transfer of shame. They wash their hands of it, and they know that they've instilled that shame in you. You know, it's very psychological. And
so you were unable, or felt you were unable to talk to anyone for a long, long time.
I did not want to tell anyone because I was so ashamed. Yeah, it was.
And what changed that for you? When were you able to talk about it?
Well, so what changed for me? I mean, the whole entire process of how this came to, I would say, a head for me, to where I said, okay, now's the time for me to do something, say something, speak up. I mean, it was really kind of strange. There was a lot of news coverage back in 2019, and
this is when he died.
It is. But so I had known, it was like a puzzle piece that I started piecing these things together. I, at the time, knew very much Ghislaine Maxwell, and her name, of course. I only knew Jeffrey Epstein as Jeffrey. The entire 17 years that I quietly, well, not, it wasn't very quiet for the first few years. I was in a very tough place for several years after. I never knew his last name was Epstein. I only knew him as Jeffrey. So for 17 years, the name Epstein didn't mean anything to me. I started hearing a lot of news about Epstein. I started hearing the name Maxwell, but it still wasn't really registering in me, in my mind. There was a younger pair of around my age anyway, journalists that were doing a YouTube show. And I was listening to the content, and I'm like folding my kids' laundry on a Sunday evening, listening to this show. And the name Maxwell, and they start talking about Robert Maxwell. And I was like, okay, Maxwell. And they were talking about New York, and they continue to talk about Epstein, and they're talking about some of the things that had happened. And it occurred to me that it was something within me that I was like, something's up here, but I don't know this guy Epstein. Anyhow, the next morning I plugged my phone in, and I accidentally had swiped or something because there was a headline that popped up on my phone, and I read the headline, and it said, Epstein found in jail cell, curled up in a ball, or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, I was filled with compassion for envisioning a grown man in such a state that he's curled up in a ball. And then I set my phone down and walked away, because at that point, again, Epstein still meant nothing to me, the name. However, that internal feeling that I was getting the evening before, I thought I need to go back and click on that news link. And I did. And so the moment I clicked on it, there was his face. And the moment I saw Jeffrey's face, it was the photo that they were using often in those articles with him in a Harvard sweatshirt. And right then and there.
You recognized it.
My whole entire world changed all over again right then and there. That moment for me of seeing his face after clicking on that headline, I don't know that I have the words to really describe it. And it certainly was this trauma. It was almost as though it was happening right here, right now. And then I started getting on my computer that day forward, and it has not gone back. The world changed for me.
Do you feel in this whole story and what's happening now that the survivors are being sidelined, that this has now become a sort of story of politics and of what's in the Epstein files, but people aren't really remembering survivors like you?
Right. So, and unfortunately, I feel like this is the common theme. The survivors are kind of left in the dust or overlooked or even unaccounted for. There are, it's my understanding anyhow, a lot of discussions and even strategy over what's going to happen with this case and how is it going to be managed. And I don't really see any survivor a part of any of the conversation, which is very unfortunate. I do think entirely that this story has just been sensationalized and political warfare. And it's a shame because there are so many women that have gone through so much, that are very clearly aware of their, it's a lived experience. They've gone through this. I've gone through what I've gone through. There were people that perpetuated my experience. There were people that passed me along. There were people that were complicit in my experience, and I'm one person, and there are so many other women that have gone through so much. So there are so many people involved here.
I've heard it described as being almost like a sort of a pyramid scheme of abuse. So you had sort of other young women who were sent out to find more women.
Yes, so you have recruiters, is what they are called. The young girl at the time that recruited me from the school, she was a recruiter. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that she would reel me in with the opportunity, get me interested enough to go speak with Sarah Cullen, who was the higher, the next level up, who spent a good amount of time with me at the beach, describing the opportunity, sharing with me all kinds of things about Miss Maxwell, as she referred to her as, and really set the stage for me to be excited to go meet Miss Maxwell.
Do you think we'll ever get to the truth? Do you think there'll ever be complete justice in this case?
Well, I feel like already first, there will never be complete justice because Jeffrey is no longer here. And so I think that piece of justice is gone. Ghislaine, there is justice in her being charged, prosecuted, found guilty. Now behind bars, there's justice in that, but it's slipping away at this point right now. And I hope it doesn't slip too far. I wouldn't be able to imagine if there were some kind of pardon or something. I don't think I could really allow myself to process that just yet at this point.